Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. Today's clip's going to be a lot different than the ones I normally produce because I'm very upset and I feel like I've got to vent a little bit and hopefully start a constructive conversation about what happened last week up in Canada. In case you missed it, some wildly irresponsible idiot decided it would be a great idea to fly their quad up to 1,500 feet in clear violation of all the rules and regulations that have been set down in Canada, impacted a small plane that was on final approach into Jean-Lesage Airport near Quebec. Now, just for a second, drink that in. Think about those 6 passengers, the pilot, the co-pilot, who were doing nothing but flying from point A to point B, looking out a window and seeing an idiot put his drone up and impact the wing of that plane. Now, I just can't comprehend how selfish you can be as a drone operator to think that your indulgence and your joy and your fun outweighs the lives of 8 people. So from my perspective, I'm extremely upset because you're being an idiot and you've put people's lives at risk. I'm also upset because I love this hobby and the people that watch this channel love the hobby as well. And one idiot like that can ruin it for everybody. And it's any technology that's out there, any new thing that comes onto the market, there's always going to be a contingent of the population that are going to take that technology and do something stupid with it. And in this case, it's no exception. So I'll talk a little bit about the incident. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the rules because I tend to stay away from political conversations and really dive into technology. But it's about time we had this conversation. And I'm going to get a lot of flames for this, and I may sound like I'm preaching, but I'm going to get my opinion out there about what the rules mean and why they're important to follow them. I'll talk a little bit about the danger, because if you're that idiot and you decide you're going to put the thing up to 1,500 feet, you may not really have thought about all the consequences, because from your perspective, it's just a fun day. Just like shooting a gun in the air or dropping a bowling ball off the 30th floor balcony. All those things may seem like fun to you, but you put people's lives at risk when you do stupid things like that, and this is no exception. And then finally, I'll talk about maybe some pragmatic things that can be done in the industry to sort of curb this kind of behavior and make drones a little bit safer, or at least hold those people responsible for those ridiculous things they do with the drones. And in this case, it's even scarier because a quad is not something that really has a person tethered to it. So in this case, that person put that quad up to 1,500 feet, crashed into the plane, probably broke the quad into 50 pieces, and they ran for home. And they may be under their bed right now trembling, hoping that the Canadian police don't figure out whose quad that was and show up knocking at their door. Because I expect that to happen, and I hope that happens. And I hope if you're watching this clip, you're trembling right now thinking, oh my gosh, this is no different than a hit and run. If I took my truck and drove it down a school zone up there in Toronto, and I hit somebody and then took off and didn't take responsibility for it, it's the exact same situation. You have 8 people's lives that were at risk because of putting that quad up that high in the air. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm really upset about this. All right, so the incident. Small plane, I think it was a Beach King Air, which seats, I think, 6 or 8 people, a pilot and a co-pilot. And again, those people's lives were at risk here. This is serious, serious stuff. This isn't just, oh, I hate the noise of your drone, don't fly it over my property. This plane could have come down, so it's extremely serious. It impacted it at 1,500 feet. Now, the rules in Canada, which again are a little more restrictive than in the States. In the States, I can fly to 400 feet. In Canada, you have to stay under 300 feet. You were 1,500. You're 5 times higher than what the rules are. Now, why are there rules, right? I'm not normally a rule follower. I break a lot of rules or bend a lot of rules, but not when people's lives are at risk. The reason the rules are there, worldwide they vary, but in general, planes have a floor, which means they don't come down below typically 500 feet, except for certain conditions. If there's an emergency and they have to land, of course, they're going to come down lower, or if they're approaching an airport. So they may lower down below that 500-foot floor for the plane to come into an airport. In the States, I can't fly above 400 feet. That wasn't a random number the FAA picked. That was a number that kept me 100 feet as a ceiling away from their floor. So I've got a 100-foot buffer, and I've also got a distance, 5 miles in the States, 3.5 miles in Canada, away from the airport, which means I'm giving them plenty of zone to land that commercial airline and not have me hitting it, right? So it is a common sense rule. If you put it up to 1,500 feet, you're clearly in the airspace that larger planes are going to be flying. Now it's just a statistical thing where it's going to happen sooner or later. So keep the thing under 400 feet. You were within violation of the airport. Apparently it happened at 1,500 feet within 3 miles of the airport. You have a 3.5 mile no-fly zone. You shouldn't be in there. You should not be flying that close to an airport. So you did that. Luckily it hit the wing. So it hit the wing, which is pretty scary because a lot of those planes carry fuel in the wings. The propellers for this plane are on those wings. So a lot of bad things could have happened. and it landed okay. So it was scratched up, it was dented, and they're looking into it right now. And again, I may sound aggressive here, but I hope they figure out who did that, because that person needs to be punished, and there should be the full weight of the law brought down on that person, no different than if they drove recklessly, hit a car, and then left, right? That's a hit and run kind of situation. Exactly the same thing here. And I know I sound aggressive, but I'm very upset about this, because responsible pilots like me are now being cast as reckless and dangerous because, oh, you fly a quad? I must have had 200 emails come in since last Thursday asking me, have you heard about this? Wow, how could this affect you? Why do you fly? What's the deal with the drones? I think they should be banned. So it's going to impact the hobby. It's a really bad situation for everybody, again, because of one idiot up there in Canada decided to put that quad up. And we have plenty of idiots here in the States that do the same thing. And it frustrates me when I get on YouTube and I see people that do clips like this that say, well, look at me, I'm flying 3,000 feet in the air. Isn't this a great view? You're breaking the law. We should hold them responsible. So whenever I see a clip like that, I immediately comment at the bottom and say, please land the drone and sell it on eBay. You shouldn't be flying that drone if you're going to behave like that. Or other ones that say, I'm going for a flight distance. Let me see, I'll travel 7 miles. Well, you can't do that in the States. I don't care if you're flying over the ocean or you're flying over the desert. If you put a quad up and it's out of visual line of sight, you're breaking the law from the FAA's perspective. That law is there for good reason, because today, most of the drones are not as smart as some of the DJI products and some of the Autel products that have collision avoidance and have the ability to sort of look around and see things around them. So if you're flying a drone out of line of sight, you're going to impact something, whether it be a building or a plane or something else. So those rules are legitimate. So don't do that stuff. But when I see those clips, I get down in the comments and I give them a hard time about, dude, you got to stop doing this. Like, take that clip down before the FAA sees that clip and starts knocking on your door. So we have to be responsible as pilots. And again, I know I sound like I'm preaching, but if you love this hobby the way I love this hobby, we have to fly responsibly, and those rules are in place to do that. So what rules did this knucklehead break? He flew too high. He was 5 times as high as he should have been. 300 feet's the limit. That's plenty to see everything you need to see in the landscape. I fly to 300 feet. I hardly ever go up to 400 feet. I'm usually 200 to 300, 350 feet to get a beautiful view of the landscape. Going above that, would it be cool? Sure, if there were no airplanes up there, but there are airplanes up there, and those guys have the right of way in that airspace, so stay the hell out of their airspace. The second was the no-fly zone. They flew too close to the airport where the plane was coming down. Now, it's a small plane. So again, it's not some big airliner that drone's going to bounce off of. This plane's a small plane. It was coming in. They looked out the window. There's a drone off our wing. What do you think went through their minds at that point? That's a start praying moment for people that are on that plane. And my heart goes out to them, again, because of this idiot drone operator. All right, the other thing they broke, the rules they broke, were you're not supposed to restricted airspace. So they were inside a restricted airspace. I doubt seriously that they followed the rule where they had their name, address, and phone number on the drone. Now, I'll talk about that at the end. I think that's a little bit dangerous, because if you're flying your drone and it hits a tree and comes down, now people know where you live. So I don't know if necessarily that should be on there, but there should be some identification on that drone, physically on the drone, that the authorities can then take that drone and go, okay, John did this. Let's go talk to John about why he did that. Don't make me the bad guy because I'm flying responsibly. Don't cast us all as hobbyists as the danger. There are idiots among us. This is a good example of the idiots among us. So as a community, what my suggestion would be to other responsible drone pilots, and I do this every time I fly, if you see somebody doing something stupid, call them out on it. It's no different than a hobby like hunting or sports or anything else. If somebody's doing, or driving, if somebody's doing something irresponsible and reckless, call them out on it. We need as a community to police ourselves. All right, so beyond that, the danger. This should be obvious. If it's a commercial airliner, maybe you'll get lucky and that drone will bounce off a wing. But if you're flying something heavy, like a lot of the bigger drones are, it's going to impact that plane and it could cause massive damage. If it gets sucked into the engines, you've got major problems. If it hits a landing gear and the plane can't land, then what? They have to belly land on the airport. That's going to be a disaster. If it hits the windshield, it could crack through the windshield or at least shatter the windshield. Now pilots are dealing with that. But more importantly, even the subtle stuff, right? This is a small plane. They were on final approach into the airport. Now, I'm not a pilot, but I've been on enough airplanes where I know the most intense time you have as a pilot is when you're taking off and when you're landing. When you're flying, you're kind of up there at 30,000 feet and you're looking for stuff, but it's not as dramatic. But when you're landing, your attention is laser focused on lining up that plane, looking for obstacles, checking the wind, side to side to make sure you're on target. The last thing you need is a distraction because some idiot decided to put a drone up off your wing. So the fact that he had to take, or she had to take, their eyes off the landing that they were in the middle of and look at the drone, much less the drone impacts the wing, it's an emergency. So they have an emergency landing. They had to call out fire and police and rescue. So the whole airport's got to be shut down for this plane to land, again, because you as an idiot decided to put that drone up that high. The other problems are, even if the thing doesn't cause damage to the plane. And again, this is a small prop plane, so can you imagine that drone hitting a prop, taking an engine out? Big deal, right? Second, it's got a LiPo battery in it. And I've talked before about the dangers of LiPo. LiPo, or lithium polymer batteries, are extremely dangerous when they're exposed or broken open. You can have a fire, and a LiPo fire burns insanely fast and insanely hot. So imagine that hitting the wing, cracking that battery, those chemicals come out and start a fire on the wing. Now we've got a really, really serious problem. So I know I'm overdoing it here with the dangers, but it should be obvious to anybody why you never want to introduce a drone to a plane at altitude. And you, sir, are an idiot that did that. So I'm saying it again. The last thing I'll talk about are some remedies. So the first thing I would suggest is, I'm a pretty responsible guy, and I've been taught since I was a kid to take responsibility for anything I do, good or bad. If it's good, praise me. If I'm bad, step up and take responsibility for it. Had it been me that decided that day that was the right thing to do, and I caused that incident, I would have to turn myself in. I know you're not going to do that, and I don't think they've figured out who it is yet. But I know your type of person. You're going to be bragging about this. You're going to be telling all your friends, hey, I was that guy with the drone in Canada. Somebody ought to turn you in. And I hope they do, and I hope the Canadian authorities come knocking on your door saying, sir, you got to come with us. We got to talk to you about this because you're ruining my right to fly. Even though I'm in the States, there's going to be a ripple effect for this that's going to sober everybody up, and I'm sure the FAA is looking at it, and they're going to put other rules and regulations in place. So let's talk about some of the remedies. I think for starters, that self-policing is extremely important. So if you're a drone hobbyist and you're out there on the internet and you're surfing YouTube channels, if you find a channel where somebody's doing something incredibly stupid in a video, put it in the comments. I know it's a small thing, but if he gets 70 or she gets 70 comments saying, why the hell are you doing that? That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and give them a thumbs down, that'll stop them from doing that hopefully over time. The other thing is, if you have friends that fly, there's a lot of new people to this hobby, and I love new flyers. I really love spending time with new guys or new women that are out there flying and want to learn about the hobby. Take the time to show them what's right. Take the time to explain how to prep the quad, how to put the quad up, what the rules are, why the rules are so important. None of us like rules. None of us like government intervention. I know there's a lot of people out there that feel like every time the FAA steps in, it's like a big brother organization. They can't tell me where to fly and when to fly. They have to take some responsibility because they're responsible for the airspace. They're the guys that are in charge of making sure planes and drones don't meet each other up there in the air. So I've got to fly by their rules. They govern that. They have sovereignty over the air. So as much as I don't like big government sort of coming in and telling me what to do, somebody has to be in charge. I feel, and I've said this before, that the FAA has been incredibly flexible with the rules they've put in place. They're all common sense rules. They're a very progressive organization that look at things like visual line of sight. They're doing testing right now to say, hey, you know what, these drones have gotten a lot smarter. Maybe we'll relax that visual line of sight requirement and let people fly beyond visual line of sight. So I think they're extremely progressive. You guys in Canada are at a really delicate point in your history with drones right now. I know that your Minister of Transportation came out with a really strict ruling. A lot of protests sparked up. I even had a clip about it. He kind of backed off a little bit on some of those rules. What do you think is going through their minds right now? Right this second. The first that I know of only confirmed drone plane collision occurred in Canada. How does he come out with a relaxed rule set at this point now that that incident has occurred? So again, that idiot, you have him to thank for that. So some common sense things that may fix this in some respects. So the self-policing is the first one. The second one is, I talked about registration before. I think it's super important that there's some registration process that they can identify a quad if they find it that did something bad and tie it back to the owner. I don't like the name and address on the drone because, again, that's my private stuff. It's on my drone. So there have been a lot of conversations about the concept of digital license plates, where maybe you've got a registration number like we did before with the FAA, which I know they're going back to get reinstated, that ties that registration number to me. And if I do something stupid, let me have it because I'm being an idiot, just like this guy in Toronto or up in Canada. If I'm being an idiot, come and ask me why I'm being an idiot, and you can get it off that registration number, find out where I live, and come knock on my door. So I think that's the first step, but I also think a digital license plate's important as well. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of companies that are working on sort of countermeasures to drones, right? That are active countermeasures. So if you watch the news, I think the Dutch have trained eagles to fly down and grab a drone. I think in the Middle East, there's a couple of countries over there that have got small drones that are flying that are anti-drone drones that'll knock drones out of the sky around the airports. Let's take a passive approach to this for starters. Let's start with some type of beacon in the drone that announces it's in the air, that we know where it is, so that that plane would know immediately that there's a drone in the airspace near them, and it would maybe take evasive action or come in through a different path, or at least let the tower know that there's some idiot flying his drone at 1,500 feet. We need to circle around and come back. but I think that digital license plate is a very easy thing to implement. It's based on current technology. I read a white paper, a couple of white papers from DJI where they've got sort of that thing all figured out already that could be implemented today from those drones. Another thing we could do, and I'm not a fan of this because it's a bit draconian, but a lot of the drone companies today have no-fly zones built into their drones, which I think is a wonderful thing, because if it's a registered no-fly drone over a power plant or some, military facility, I shouldn't be flying there. And if they've agreed that we shouldn't have drones flying over it, I'm not going to break that rule. So if I put my drone up and inadvertently try to fly into an area where I shouldn't be flying, it allows me to land the drone or come back and say, hey, you're about to violate an airspace that you're not allowed to fly in. That's a good thing. The only guys that would have a problem with that are guys that want to break the rules and fly over that airspace. And there's exceptions. You can apply for exceptions in those no-fly zones and get them. So I don't think no-fly zones are a bad thing. I also think there should be a way to limit, maybe as a beginner mode, new drone owners that have a drone that says, look, you're not really good at flying yet. It's going to take you a couple of weeks. Maybe there's a test you got to pass, but at least start it off with some limitations where it can only fly 200 feet high. You can't go to the full 400 feet until you do certain things like pass a test or prove, maybe get so many hours in the air that you haven't had a crash or something, but some progressive thing like we have with driving in New Jersey. In New Jersey, when you're a new driver, you can't stay out past a certain hour. You can't have extra kids in the car. There's a lot of things that sort of allow that new driver or new drone operator to sort of get good at what they're doing well before they decide, hey, I'm gonna have 7 kids in the car and stay out till 2 in the morning. So I think that progressive thing would be good, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of grief for that, but if you're a responsible drone operator, you're probably gonna agree with some of the stuff I'm talking about. And the licensing thing, I'm not a big fan of paying for licenses, so make it free, but that registration is no different than what you do today with your gun, your dog, and your boat, right? Everybody has to know what those things are about. This is a pretty serious device. They're heavy, they can fly miles, they've got high definition cameras on them, and honestly, there's enough idiots out there that are buying drones today that want to do incredibly stupid things with them that they're gonna ruin the hobby for everybody. So enough about that. The last thing I'll say is that I love this hobby, and it troubles me terribly that this one incident is going to ripple across our entire landscape. And I hate to say it, but human nature is such that good things hardly ever get reported. Bad things travel like wildfire. And just to prove that point, again, I've had a couple hundred emails since this thing has happened. I woke up the other morning, I'm in the bathroom shaving, and my Alexa is reporting that a drone crashed into it's on my Alexa, so it's on CNN, CBC, it's on every news channel, and people with that little smirk like to get up there and say, well, a drone crashed into a plane, we all saw this coming. We didn't have to see this coming. That one idiot should not have flown that drone that high, and I'm not a big fan of punishing the community because of the actions of one knucklehead. Find the knucklehead, punish that knucklehead, we'll all stand behind you, but understand that the majority of people flying these quads today are just like me. We spend a lot of money on them. We love the position they give us in the sky to view beautiful landscapes and capture some wonderful footage of lakes and forests and shorelines, and it's a big deal for me to be able to put that thing up and enjoy that afternoon with my family and my friends. And again, one knucklehead could ruin that for all of us. So I vented enough here, but I wanted to start a conversation below because I feel it's about time as a community we stepped up and really chastised the knuckleheads that are flying these things irresponsibly. But more importantly, I want to get your opinions on other solutions that maybe would make sense for you that are sort of somewhere in between being draconian and being no regulations whatsoever. That would make sense, because I know, I can guarantee you at this point, the FAA's had meetings about this. I'm sure the Canadian transport ministers had many meetings about this ever since that incident. And I just don't want these rules to come out with at least some input from our community to say, we understand it was a bad thing that happened. This guy was an idiot and he should be punished, but the rest of us are not idiots. Don't cast us as irresponsible drone flyers. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. And I'm sorry if I went on a little too long here or sounded preachy, but really what I wanted to do was vent, get this off my chest. Because again, what an idiot this guy was to put that drone up so high. But more importantly, let's all get together around this and start self-policing the industry and try to keep these guys from getting their thumbs on those controls and doing really stupid things with this technology, because, man, it is a great hobby. And this would be a terrible day if that incident had a dramatic effect on the ability of the rest of us to put those drones up and fly. So anyway, comment below. I don't have anything else to say about it today. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate the support this channel had. And I felt like as a public service, I had to get my opinions out there, and hopefully we'll spark a conversation with you guys about your thoughts on it and your opinions around this particular incident. So anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks an awful lot for watching. And I promise you the next couple of clips, I'll be back to my uplifting self and bright eyes and very positive attitude about the technology I'm talking about. But man, this one really got me upset. So thanks for watching.